Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, Middlekauff, mailbag. You guys know the drill. Very simple. At John Middlekauff, DMs, wide open, fire in. Instagram, at John Middlekauff, 2 Fs, and fire in those DMs. Question for the bag. Do you think Lawrence is a bust? I saw a stat graphic the other day comparing Trevor and Daniel Jones. That's not good. Nearly identical records and stats through their first 48 career starts. Trevor was hyped to be one of the best quarterbacks prospects to ever come out of the draft. Yet he's been very disappointing. Would love to hear your thoughts. Also, starting up my own sports podcast. Would love to have you on. Shoot me an email. You can find it, I think it's on my Twitter account. I would say this about Trevor Lawrence. It has been hugely disappointing because of the expectations. Relative to when you draft a quarterback, a huge part of the way we judge you, when it comes in sports, is about the hype. So whenever in life you hype something up, like, hey, this is the best restaurant I've ever been to. You got to come eat with me here. You got to come. This is the best sandwich I've ever had. Happens with food all the time. You tell your friends, you tell your family, like, I'm telling you, it's the best slice of fucking pizza I've ever had. And then you take someone to have that slice of pizza with you, and they're like, kind of overrated. But you set the expectations. So the expectations on Trevor Lawrence, one of the best prospects we've ever seen. Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning became top 5 quarterback of all time. Andrew Luck clearly was really good, right? And Trevor Lawrence compared to that. Well, what happens? He doesn't remotely live up to that standard, right? By Andrew Luck's 3rd year, they're in the playoffs back-to-back years. He's winning playoff games. His general manager let him out because no one could block for him, and he was a little reckless as a player. But I think when you look at Trevor Lawrence, he's a product of the hype. And the hype he has not lived up to. Now, relative to his draft class, Mac Jones, bench for Bailey Zappi, who also stinks. Trey Lance, a 3rd-string quarterback in Dallas. Zach Wilson, they can't get rid of him fast enough. Got benched by his 2nd year in the league. And Justin Fields, who is the 2nd-best quarterback of that group, is really just a runner with a couple splash plays, can't play within the pocket. To me, Trevor Lawrence, you watch him, like, okay, he overthrew him. So it's just, this year was really bad. Now, is it injuries? Sometimes you watch him, you wish there was a little more oomph to him. Like when you watch young Peyton Manning, you're like, fuck, this guy is all in. Like this guy is not messing around. And you watch Josh Allen just laying it on the line. Even Tua, I don't think he's that great of a player, but it feels like he's giving you it his all. Sometimes with Trevor Lawrence, and it might just be because of his talent, right? I think you see this with Anthony Davis. Now, I'm not comparing Trevor Lawrence to Anthony Davis because Anthony Davis is an elite NBA player when he's on the court, and he's having a great season. I haven't watched a minute of Laker basketball. I see that they're in shambles, though, and that makes me happy. My point is, Anthony Davis was clearly everyone would want him. Like Trevor Lawrence, I was listening to Bill Simmons and Sal this morning at the gym. It's like if you called the Bears right now, hey, if you're going to trade Fields, would you give us the number 1 pick for Trevor Lawrence? They'd hang up on you. I think Washington would hang up on you. I think the New England Patriots would hang up on you. And part of it is he's going into his 4th year, contract right around the corner. He's not getting paid this offseason. How much is he worth? Because there is not everyone is just this max player. And that's what started happening in the NFL a lot with quarterbacks, happened in the NBA forever. The overwhelming majority of these NBA players are not max players. So it's why you have so many bad contracts in the NBA. And so many contracts are that's going to hinder that team. Right? For the most part, how many guys are truly worth the most amount of money? Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar's proving that. Obviously, the Brady, the Rodgers. I mean, I'm talking every single year if he's on, he can win the MVP. He's going to lead me to the playoffs. Football's a little weird. Weird shit can happen. Mahomes could be one and done this year in the playoffs. Who cares? Right? There's a lot of pressure on Lamar, but he's proven to be worth every penny. Trevor Lawrence, got a ways to go. This is the NFL is the first time he's had adversity in his life. He went to Clemson when they were already winning a national championship. He got there, they had already won. Then he gets there, they win, and they're obviously really good during his tenure, but it was pretty easy. It's kind of the question sometimes when you see these guys in college never have any struggles. So what I liked about Jalen Hurts, Nick Saban said, you're benched, you're not good enough. He had to transfer. I mean, he was told, everyone made this big deal when Jalen Milroe was told by Bill O'Brien, you should play another position. Like, have you watched Jalen Milroe? Not a very good thrower of the ball. But he literally, like, they told Jalen Hurts, leave. Even this year with Caleb Williams, like, their team sucked. It was not easy. So honestly, I'd view that as somewhat of a positive evaluating the guy. It's like he went through some struggles as an individual, as a team. It was Michael Penix, Indiana, getting hurt all the time. Team sucked. Bo Nix run out of town in the SEC. There's a lot of guys in this class. You could argue J.J. McCarthy would be the one guy who's always had a success as the starter. But even him, like, didn't get to be the full-time starter immediately when he got to Michigan. Remember, what was the guy's name? McNamara, that he had to split time with. Like, Trevor Lawrence, the first sign of turbulence he'd ever had, well, he got handed it immediately when he got Urban Meyer. So it's been in the NFL. And it's why I talk about, I think the biggest, thing for any young person in life is to gain experience, good and bad, right? So any industry, just start working right away. It's why, obviously in college, try to do jobs that you ultimately want to do. Get in any way possible. And you can kind of see for your own, with your own eyes, what works, what doesn't, and you build on those experiences, right? Because you got to go and understand that, like, this shit's hard no matter what you do. And the faster you go through the failures, the easier it is to come out on the other end, right? Now, I don't know. You got to be mentally tough to come out on the other end. And there were some question marks about Trevor Lawrence. How much does he love football? Because he clearly is physically gifted, but you watched him yesterday. You're just like, God, there's just something to be desired. There's something missing. And clearly, he's not some all-time great prospect. Like, that's a fact. He might become a really good player still, but he's not the fastest guy. He doesn't have the biggest arm. And let's face it, he's not very accurate. He turns the ball over a lot. So to me, his ceiling is never Mahomes or Josh Allen. Like, I witnessed Josh Allen year 3. He looked like Cam Newton meets John Elway, right? And you watch him now by year 6 or whatever year he's in, he's just an elite dominant player. Same thing what Mahomes proved very early. Listen, I'm a big believer in Justin Herbert, but there'll be a lot of pressure on him next year, right? Just like you saw Jalen. There's a lot of pressure on just sustaining it every year. Lamar answered the bell, and he answered the bell fast. So I think they're just major question marks. And the only way that he can answer them is next year play well and next year earn a contract, because this year he did not. Now, you could argue he was banged up, and I don't have like his, only the team truly knows how injured he was. But listen, he was healthy enough to play yesterday, and he was, I would say, relative to the hype, was one of the more disappointing games I've ever seen. Right? A couple turnovers, the throws at the end of the game. I mean, the throw that ended their season was not remotely close. It's one thing. Listen, sometimes you make a bad throw. Gardner Minshew on that play, the 31 that lost him the game. Not a great throw. Still hit him in the hands. Still gave his guy a chance. I mean, we can say it's got to be better, and it does. You got to hit the guy in stride, but he still could have dropped it. Trevor didn't even give his guy a chance. So maybe he lost his confidence. That's another thing. I've lost my confidence before. It's happened in multiple industries. It happened when I was in the NFL and Chip Kelly came in and things started getting weird. It happened when I was in the radio business, when we got new management and I could tell, like, I'm probably on the outs. You just lose your sense of keeping pedal to the metal and full belief in yourself, right? And I don't care what you do. When you lose confidence, I think it's easier to maintain confidence the older you get. Back to what I said with experience. You can lean on that. But when you're younger, even, for most human beings, being young is like in your 30s or early 40s. But in this profession, like early mid-20s, you start losing your confidence. Athletes talk about it all the time. You can become a scrub fast, even if you have the physical capabilities. And that's kind of what he looked like a very, very average player, which is extremely disappointing for a guy that was a no-brainer number 1 overall pick. And after last year, looked like a guy ascending. And this year, he went the other way. Honestly, didn't even know this was a thing. Haven't been too locked into the internet today besides some Black Monday stuff. But Rudolph or Pickett, who would you start? Is this something that's being talked about right now? Like, is there controversy on who's going to be the Steelers starting quarterback this weekend? I honestly didn't know, because to me there is no debate. Mason Rudolph's starting quarterback. I mean, he's a starting quarterback till you lose, which I expect you to lose this weekend, but under no circumstances are you going back to Kenny Pickett at this point. You can't. I mean, the season changed when you put in Mason Rudolph. To me, it's pretty simple. What is your opinion on Dennis Allen apologizing to Arthur Smith? And how does the team not listening to him overriding his decision to take a knee not prove that the players do not respect him and he has lost the locker room? Well, if you listen to Sunday night's podcast after I reacted to the Bills, I hit on it. Now, at the time, Arthur Smith hadn't been fired yet, so it makes a little more sense why he was super mad. He was on tilt, getting embarrassed by Dennis Allen and Derek Carr was the nail in his coffin. But I understand after just watching everything over the last, Dennis Allen told, when you're a head coach and I tell you to run left and you run right, when I tell you to pass the ball and you run the ball, when I tell you to blitz and you don't blitz, when I tell you the meeting's at 8 a.m. and you show up at 8:20 a.m., I get like a huge part of football is authority. I clicked on Shannon and Chad Ochocinco last night, and Shannon was crushing Jameis, saying that like basically you can't have in football, if people aren't willing to listen to the head coach, regardless of what he says in a moment like that, he can't be the head coach. He lacks the authority. And I was like, I didn't really think about it like that. There is some credence to that. Somewhat of a unique situation. I understand they were in victory formation, wanted to get Jamal a touchdown, but I get it. Listen, I'd fire Dennis Allen. I don't think he's good enough. Really good defensive coordinator, head coach. You just missed the playoffs in a horrendous division, right? You get these 2 wins at the end of the season. You beat the shit out of Atlanta. You dominate Tampa. Who cares? You're sitting at home. I mean, you needed other teams. Like you wouldn't even have went if Green Bay had lost because Seattle won. So you actually weren't even there's 7 teams now, right? This is not 2015 where it was pretty hard to make the playoffs, right? Most 9-8 teams would never sniff the playoffs. And you didn't win your division. You're sitting at home. So listen, I get it. I think there's some merit to it. I have no problem with Jameis doing it. But would Jameis have done that? And listen, he's always been a little anti-authority. Would he have done that to Andy Reid or Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick? Probably not. Would he do that to Sean Payton? Doubtful. Would he do it to Dennis Allen? Well, he proved he would. He did. Longtime listener and first-time mailbag question. Is Mike Vrabel to the Patriots the best hire if Bill leaves? The defensive mind and former connections make too much sense. There's been a lot of talk about the Patriots and Gerard Mayo, the longtime linebacker. Now he's been on the staff for a long time, being the transitional piece, being the guy on staff when they fire Belichick that is just going to take over. We'll see how that plays out over this week. I think it's going to take a couple days for this Belichick thing to take shape. But ultimately, my question is going to be, do you want to be the guy that fires or follows Bill Belichick? Because usually you want to be the guy that follows the guy that followed the guy. Easier to replace. It's not going to be easy to be the next head coach at Alabama. There are a lot of positives, right? The program's rolling and everything, but that's not easy. You are compared to Nick Saban. You are compared to Bill Belichick. To me, if I'm Mike Vrabel, I would probably just try to stay at Tennessee for a couple more years, let that situation, kind of play itself out. If we still suck, go. Because Belichick's not going anywhere. The other thing is, Robert Kraft and the Kraft family love the guy. I'd be a little shocked at this point. Again, this is just educated guess. I don't know Vrabel. I understand the connections. Obviously, he played a huge role. The Krafts love him. He kicked their ass and ended the Brady Belichick era in 2019, like kind of ended the dynasty. But personally, again, I'm biased on this one. I'd much rather live in Nashville than in the New England area, a lot colder. Vrabel's a Midwest guy, right? He's from Ohio. Went to Ohio State. Maybe he isn't as big in Nashville as I would be, or maybe you would be. So maybe he would end up there. I also think if Mike Vrabel is truly available, there are going to be a lot of teams very interested in him, right? And what can he do? And this is why I like Belichick. The defensive coach is a little riskier when they don't have their offensive coordinator. Well, Belichick has Josh McDaniels available. So if I'm one of these, owners, Washington, Atlanta, Tepper, Belichick gets to come with his offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels. I'm assuming that. I mean, I don't know. Josh made so much money getting fired, but what's Josh going to do? Sit and watch TV and eat ice cream all day? Which, clearly was hard for him when he coached. He gained a lot of weight. Maybe he's lost some pounds. Maybe he's got his energy back and pair with Belichick and try to make another run. So, well, what does Mike Vrabel have? Arthur Smith, who was the best offensive coordinator he had available. Arthur Smith's proven. He's a good number 2. There's nothing wrong I say it all the time. I understand why Todd Bowles, Dennis Allen accept these head coaching jobs. They're number 2s. And there's nothing. And listen, Todd Bowles is proven to be, probably a mid-tier guy, right? He's credible head coach, but he's an elite number 2. Same thing with Fangio, an elite defensive coordinator. And I'm not just judging him off this year in Miami. If you give him good players, he will dominate. Arthur Smith has proven you just give him an average quarterback and he's the offensive coordinator, can't handle the whole team. But if he can just focus on the offense, Vrabel leads the team, motivates, handles the defensive side of the ball, they're a good tandem. So listen, if you can get Mike Vrabel with Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator, I think teams will be all over that. Because here's the other thing. You don't have to worry about Arthur Smith getting a head coaching job right away. Who's hiring Arthur Smith in the next couple of years? Newsflash, nobody. Question for the bag. Obviously, lots of people are blaming the wide receivers on the Chiefs for their offensive woes this season. But since promoting Matt Nagy to offensive coordinator, the offense looks like it has regressed, and the play calling has been stale. Outside of drafting some wide receiver high in the draft, could you see Andy Reid firing Matt Nagy and reuniting Mahomes with Cliff Kingsbury to bring some new juice? No chance. Absolutely none. One, their wide receivers are really bad. Like, they lead the NFL in drops. And last time I checked, I think it was by a pretty wide margin. Like, listen, Andy Reid is running the offense. He has since he got in Kansas City. They're having a rough stretch, right? They won 11 games. And this is what I talk about with expectations. Do you know how many teams in the NFL their owner would give like their pinky toe to have the season that Andy just had? Wait, you're the 3 seed. You're hosting a playoff game. You're a huge favorite in the first round. You're likely to play in the second round. You won the division for the 20th straight time. It's like they're a product of their expectations. The reason we're hard on Trevor Lawrence and, I'm easier on Brock Purdy. One guy was the last pick of the draft. The other guy was a generational prospect. Like, the Chiefs aren't compared to, everyone's giving the Packers a lot of praise, rightfully so, or the Houston Texans. They had no expectations. The Rams, I thought the Rams were going to fucking suck. I thought they were going to draft in the top 10. Now they're in the playoffs and they might win a playoff game. Everyone expects Mahomes, Andy, Super Bowl. Sometimes you have an up and down year. Happened to the Patriots multiple times during their 20-year run. They'll be fine. They'll reload. Andy's the mastermind there. I promise you. They'll be okay. I'm a Bears fan, and I agree. It's time to take Caleb. But not enough people are talking about how bad of a planner and play caller Luke Getsy is. Do you know what I love about football? And this is what the other sports don't have. Is like, no one believes in baseball the hitting coach makes that big a difference. It's like, dude, stop swinging at the outside slider. Like, it's on the player. In basketball, no one knows 99% of the assistant coaches. They just are viewed as very relevant. In football, every fan of their team in Division I football, definitely the SEC and the Big Ten, and obviously the NFL, knows their coordinators. And I would say the majority of their coordinators are not highly thought of, especially when the team struggles a little bit. Fire the coordinator. Can't take the throne without going through Green Bay. They solve him every time, and he's from there. Can't put this ugly loss on Fields. He's equally culpable. I think they keep the head coach, but the only way Chicago finally solves its century-long quarterback problem is to hire an offensive savant at offensive coordinator, like Bieniemy, Reich, or Kellen Moore. Somehow Caleb would actually respect. What say you? Well, Frank Reich, his offense has been absolutely hideous the last several years. Kellen Moore got away from the Cowboys umbrella and did not have a good year. And Eric Bieniemy, I saw they scored more points last year with North Turner's kid, Scott Turner, than they did with Eric Bieniemy. And at one point in time, the Washington Commanders, Redskins football team were on pace to break David Carr's single sack record. Now, you could argue all these guys, your personnel, who's injured, who's not. I think sometimes I'd be very hesitant about all these guys. Now, if you're them and you do fire Getsy, here's what I would say. You are playing with a quarterback who can't play within the pocket. He can't. When he freaks out, he doesn't slide, he runs. If you watch Jordan Love, if you watch most good quarterbacks, they scramble. There's nothing wrong with scrambling to throw. Fields had a couple great outside the pocket throws. He could make as incredible of a highlight play as anyone in the league. But when there's a little pressure from the left, from the right, up the middle, instead of just sliding, and we talk about this all the time, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady became the greatest quarterbacks of all time by doing that. They couldn't move a lick. He takes off and he runs into half his sacks. He's an awful quarterback within the pocket. It's one thing, to me, Lamar, like you talk, well, stats aren't as good as 2019. He is dramatically better as a player in 2023. He's much more calm. He's less likely to freak out under pressure. He slides before he runs. Fields is either it's there. If it's not there, he looks to run. And half those, he runs into pressure. So we can crush Getsy, but like I don't think he was dealing with a very good pocket quarterback. And when you don't have a good pocket quarterback, it's hard to play. And then if all you do is run him, everyone's like, well, all you're doing is running him, let him throw. Well, the reason, remember last year when all they did was run him, was because he can't really throw from within the pocket. It's why I love the Packers this week. Everyone was like, oh, Chicago. No, man. Jordan Love is a way better player than Justin Fields. I'm not saying he's faster. I'm not saying he has a bigger arm. He's a better quarterback. And that was on full display. It was on full display on Sunday afternoon in Lambeau Field. And if Luke Getsy had Jordan Love, I think they would look better. Now, I don't know Luke Getsy. I'm not trying to defend the guy, but I think this is a scenario where quarterbacks like that can make your coordinator look bad. Never forget Russell Wilson. Every offensive coordinator he's ever had besides Sean Payton has been fired. He's not an easy guy to coach. And Russell Wilson's obviously dramatically better than Justin Fields. But when you're not great in the pocket, it's hard to scheme for you. Because if I just call normal pass plays that all the good teams run, my guy can't execute it half the time. So then he starts scrambling. He runs into sacks half the time of those plays. I just think it's a little more complicated than you think. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer to help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook now and use code JOHN. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN John. The crown is yours. Okay, hey John, longtime listener, born and raised in Jupiter, Florida. Always wanted to go there. Home of obviously a lot of golfers, and just seems like a great place. Lifelong Eagles fan. Never been the biggest believer in Hurts. My question is betting on the guy, as you say, is the answer to giving away big contracts. On talent alone, I think scouts could find similar quarterbacks to do what Hurts does, but what separates him is his leadership. But when the team is in a rut, I see him pouting. He does not see the field well and has horrible pocket awareness. How difficult is it to move past a contract like this? And do you think the Eagles and other teams should keep the core of skill O-line, D-line, and keep trying out quarterbacks without the big contracts? To second this, Hurts does have enough talent to elevate the team. Example was today versus the Giants. Doesn't have enough talent. Should be able, as a franchise quarterback, to put him on their back. He is untalented and has a bad attitude. Yeah, I don't think he's untalented. I think this year he's developed a lot of bad habits. And this is what I get back to. The Eagles' problem right now is their coaching structure, right? They lost their offensive coordinators, proven to be really good with the Indianapolis Colts. And they're dependent on Nick Sirianni, who is like turned in somehow to John Harbaugh. Like, you just lead? Like, are we scheming? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Because Bosa said this a month ago when the Niners beat the shit out of him. He said, going into the game, we knew that we'd get after Hurts because his eyes go down. He looks at the ground when pass rush comes, and he gets flustered easily. We talk about this all the time. Eyes with quarterbacks. Keep your eyes up, because it's very hard to play. That's why you get $45 million. You have to feel pressure, slide, eyes up down the field so you can see all your different targets, go through your reads as pressure's coming. Shit happens fast. And to me, you watch a guy that does not look remotely the same. And to me, he proved enough last year when he had a good coach, a good offensive coordinator, to be a really good player. The Eagles were in a tough spot. He was going in, to his final season. They extended him betting on the come. And I would say it backfired a little bit. But I think it's an easy fix because they'll add a new offensive coordinator. The one thing the Eagles will do is they're very aggressive with coaches. They wanted, what's his name? Vic Fangio last year. They just got screwed up by the timing of it all. He would have been their defensive coordinator. And they had a backup plan this year if Desai didn't work in Patricia. Now, it hasn't worked, but they're always thinking like that. I'll promise you. Brian Johnson is done. He is not going to be the play caller next year. Zero chance. And they're either going to put it on Sirianni, like, hey, can you coach this position? Can you run this operation? Can you coach our most prized asset? Definitely our most expensive asset. Because if you can't, we're going to have to go in a different direction. That's what I would say. So I wouldn't sell Jalen Hurts stock fully now. I do think you just kind of hold. I wouldn't keep investing in it. But I think next year is a huge year. Get a new offensive coordinator. Get a new guy to coach him on a daily basis. Because right now it's not working out. He's getting worse. His fundamentals are awful. Eyesight's awful. He's never going to be Peyton Manning, Tom Brady in the pocket, but he was much more comfortable last year, right? And part of it is a huge part of his game was running. And when you watch him and they're playing decent, they're mixing in runs with him. That's where Lamar took his game to another level. He doesn't have to run. Lamar could just be a passing quarterback. And part of being a passing quarterback when you're a fantastic athlete like that is moving around behind the line of scrimmage and still making passes. To me, when Jalen's playing his best, a decent percentage are from within the pocket and a lot are on the move, right? And then you mix in a couple runs here and there. But when I can just force him to be a pocket passer, I'm going to win. I'm a Vikings fan, so I have no dog in the fight. But how could DeMeco Ryans not be the coach of the year over Stefanski, given how bad the Texans were for the last couple years? Kudos to keeping the Browns afloat with a backup quarterback. The Texans sucked for years before DeMeco. Yeah, DeMeco did an incredible job. No way around it. And the best thing that ever happened to the Texans, you could argue in the history of the franchise, was this offseason. They got a coach-quarterback combination. It turned out Watson and O'Brien were never going to work long-term. O'Brien's crazy. Watson's got issues. And while it looked fruitful early, it was destined to fail. This thing looks destined to sustain. One, because both guys, super high-level good people. DeMeco, elite character. When you just look at the history of the league, all the highest character guys in the NFL, DeMeco's at the top. He's a Walter Payton Man of the Year type guy. And C.J. Stroud, just from watching how impressive he is his rookie year, seems like a complete stud as a guy. So I think the Texans, whether he wins it this year or not, who cares? I think sometimes awards, especially Coach of the Year, MVP, it's much harder to win. Coach of the Year is a little random, right? Stefanski easily could because he won all these games with Joe Flacco. Dan Campbell would be my vote. It's only the second time in the franchise history they've won 12 games. The franchise has been around since 1934. Franchise has been around. The Detroit Lions have been around since 1934. They've won 12 games 2 times. Basically a 90-year franchise. The Niners have won 12 games in the last decade, 5 different times. So what Dan Campbell did with Detroit, I think is impressive. Now, if you wanted to vote for Stefanski, you wanted to vote for DeMeco Ryans, I'm not arguing with you at all. So, yeah. Lifelong Giants fan, can you detail your opinion on Brian Daboll? It felt like the prevailing view after last season was that he overachieved getting Daniel Jones into the playoffs and that the Bills and Josh Allen seemed to take a step back with his absence. This year was obviously a tire fire, and it seems that the narrative has shifted. What's the view on him? High-level offensive coach or just walk-around guy? Who's losing sway in the locker room and his coaching staff? Yeah, obviously I'm recording this. Wink Martindale just quit. I was very impressed with him last year because I thought his roster sucked. I didn't think his roster was any good. Thought it was a 4-5 win team, like they were this year. I do not think the Giants have a very good roster, but I didn't know anything about them. And then this year, I started hearing things. I'm not a reporter. I don't even consider myself a media guy. I'm here to entertain and make money. And sometimes the order of that changes. That's all that matters for me. I don't have agendas. I don't give a shit. I've never met Brian Daboll. I don't know him personally. None of this stuff really is personal to me when I'm talking about coaches and the things I know. I just know a lot of people in the NFL on a lot of different teams that hear a lot of different things. And I know when stuff's pretty credible. And I talked about this earlier in the season that Wink Martindale hated the guy, couldn't stand the guy. And the reason is because Brian Daboll like screams at you like Belichick does. I don't even know if Belichick does it to the extent this guy does. The difference is Belichick knows everything that's going on, knows every play call, every scheme, every piece of information. Brian Daboll doesn't call the offense. He's just a walk-around guy. And from what I was told is like he tries to be buddy-buddy with the players. He's a complete asshole to the coaches, so the players don't turn on him, but all the coaches did. And Wink Martindale, who has been saying for a month now, like everything's fine, was lying through his teeth. Couldn't quit fast enough. Everyone in the league knew that this thing was over. To me, the question is like, does John Mara have a problem on his hands? And only time will tell. I think the Giants kind of do. One, just the roster, the quarterback situation, and this coach. Like Wink Martindale's really good. You watch the Giants for the last couple of years, their defense has not been their problem. Their offense has. Well, isn't Brian Daboll an offensive coach? It's like, oh, they really took a step back in Buffalo. Did they? I watched Josh Allen today or last night fucking win the division 4 straight time. Heading into the playoffs as the number 2 seed. Sure seemed like when they got Ken Dorsey out of there when Joe Brady, everything turned around. Yeah, he throws some picks. It's kind of how he plays. Big fans started listening last year. My question is, do you believe there's any chance Mahomes and the Chiefs offense get it together for the playoffs? Or do you think they are going one and done? I don't think they're going one and done because of the matchup. And I think round 2 has a chance to be pretty cool. You know, the Bills, assuming they can take business against the Steelers, I expect the Chiefs to take care of business against the Dolphins. We get a matchup that is just elite TV. I mean, that's got Saturday night written all over it. That is a primetime NFL playoff game. Chiefs at the Bills, with the Bills a chance to, I would say, get the monkey off their back of what happened a couple years ago with 13 seconds, because that's something that's kind of lingered over them. And if the Bills house the Steelers, which I expect them to do, even though they're kind of banged up, then they beat the Chiefs. Like, we're going to be talking about, can the Bills upset the Ravens, assuming that they beat whoever they have to play? So I think the Chiefs win a playoff game because of the matchup. And then listen, they're going to be a tough out. Champions are tough outs. You usually have to kill a champion to get them to tap out. Average teams that don't know what they're doing, like if you're not good enough, you're having an off year, you usually fold. Like the Chiefs are not going to fold. I don't expect them to. They might lose by 10 points to the Bills in the second round because their wide receivers just simply aren't good enough. Here's what I'll promise you this offseason. The Chiefs will sign a legit NFL veteran wide receiver. They will invest in a tight end and wide receivers. They will do that. That's coming. Happened to the Patriots. Happened twice to the Patriots. When they shifted to get Welker, Moss, and that crew, and then when that crew ended and they went with Gronk, Edelman, and kind of James White and that crew. So, like, this football, it's very fluid. They made some transitional moves, and some of them worked. Some of them left some holes that they hoped to fill through the draft. It turns out they kind of couldn't, right? It's sometimes you draft players and they're just not good enough. They're not the first team to miss on that. For the mailbag, Chargers fan here. Christmas came early last year. Beside Harbaugh and old-ass Bill, how much should we pay if we don't land those guys? Still cheap. I think that I think the Chargers have to sign a guy who's been a head coach. They can't afford. I've been saying this forever. Are they going to land Harbaugh? No clue. I know a lot of people in the NFL think he's going to end up there. Would they land Bill Belichick? I don't see. If Bill Belichick's available, I don't see him coming out west. If Tomlin were to be relieved of his duties, to me, he would make a lot of sense. Same with Mike Vrabel. They need a guy that knows what he's doing. They need a guy. They're not looking to win Super Bowl here. They're just looking to like go to the playoffs for back-to-back years. And to me, the only way you feel good about that is hiring a guy with a resume of winning, who has been a head coach. You can't keep hiring these guys who have never been a head coach and then complain when they're not good enough. Dan Quinn to me is a little risky because when he didn't have Kyle Shanahan, he wasn't very good. Right now, to me, Mike Vrabel, Arthur Smith, no brainer. Right, if I could get Tomlin and pair him up with one of the top offensive coordinators, no brainer. And again, it doesn't look like Tomlin's going to be available, but you know what I mean. I don't think Belichick's an option, but if I get Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, I'm doing that yesterday. Do I have faith that the Chargers are going to do any of that? No. Do I expect them to just hire some random coordinator? Probably. I know everyone's like, this is their year. This is the time they're going to do it. Well, when they finally do it, I'll believe it. Until they do it, I'm not believing it, right? I'm not betting on Rory McIlroy to win the Masters. When he finally wins the Masters, I'll be excited. I'm not putting money on it. Not happening. Not doing it. Listen to every episode from Australia. How quickly do you think the Chiefs can retool and overturn their offensive receiving core? Are the offensive struggles something that can be fixed in the offseason? One issue I think with the Chiefs is their offensive line kind of got old and didn't play as well. So you could argue it's more than just their weapons. Their offensive line has been a problem. But this gets back to, if I have to retool my offense, is there any better coach in the league to have than Andy Reid? How many different offenses has he retooled in his life? Think of all the different iterations in Philly. Like the Philadelphia Eagles I was a part of were like the third iteration. Macklin, Shady, Deshaun, Jason Peters, Michael Vick, Brent Selleck. Like he had several other groups over the 2000s before I got there in 2010. Think of the groups that he had in Kansas City. When he got there, he traded for Alex Smith. He had Dwayne Bowe. He had Jamal Charles. And then he shifted. They drafted Travis Kelce. They drafted Tyreek Hill. They signed Jeremy Macklin. So he'll be fine. They will figure it out. If I was a Chiefs fan, and this is where like Belichick had earned this when they made some changes, like feel confident in the long-term belief in your operator. Most teams do not have that. You have that. Yeah, this year you're probably out in the second round. And who knows? I mean, I can't see Miami in 0-degree weather beating them. But playoffs football, things are weird. I just have a hard time seeing Tua play well in that environment. But I guess ultimately, you guys would be fine. This isn't your year. There's nothing wrong with that. Commanders fan. Colleges, JMU. I think that's James Madison. Who are the best fits for head coach and general manager? I just think you guys, I talked about this on the podcast. To me, this one's pretty simple. Your owner has proven his last couple of hires in Philadelphia. He got Doc Rivers, who was one of the higher paid guys and a champion, and who had proven they'd go to the playoffs every year. And then when they fired him, they got Nick Nurse, who won an NBA title with the Toronto Raptors and Kawhi Leonard. And who's his GM been the last several years? Daryl Morey. Listen, I don't always believe philosophically in Daryl Morey. It's like, hey, you're shooting 27 straight threes. And he's like, that's statistically, the odds were on our side. How about you get to the fucking rim at about miss number 19? And maybe you beat the Warriors and you go to the title and you win it in Houston. But they refused. But say what you want. Like Daryl Morey knows what he's doing. Weird relationship with James Harden, but that's a conversation for another day. You'll go big game hunting. You will get guys who are good at their job. I'd feel pretty good about that. I think the guys they have running it, I also talked about them in the podcast, Bob Myers, Rick Spielman. I would expect you guys to have success with whoever you hire. And I would imagine they're going to be famous guys with long resumes who aren't going to be cheap. I'm a non-geographic Seahawks fan, and I've been wondering about what the team should do, quarterback-wise for the future. I know Geno was a huge revelation, but that's not the long-term answer. Our team drafts and develops quite well, especially late and in the past, which is why I come to ask what you would do if the Hawks trading up to get Michael Penix Jr. He was a Washington guy, wondering if, because he's older, that the geographic closeness matters. And we have a lot of young studs at wide receiver. Would love to hear your thoughts. Well, I think the geographic closeness, when you're an NFL team, you just have the best information for that guy. And sometimes it can cloud your judgment, right? Like the Tomlin and those guys with Kenny Pickett. You could argue they knew him too well. They valued it. Because sometimes when you like a player and he's a super high character guy, you like fall in love with the guy and you let the guy kind of overshadow average talent. I saw it with the Niners when they drafted Solomon Thomas, who's a good NFL player, should never have been drafted number 3 overall. But John Lynch was taking this leadership class at Stanford. Solomon Thomas happened to be in it. They became buddies. It just can cloud your judgment sometimes when you're too close. John Schneider is proven to like twitchy guys, to like big time athletic guys. He wanted Josh Allen. Never forget, in 2018, he wanted to trade Russell Wilson for the number 1 pick and draft Josh Allen. Russell Wilson, like obviously smaller player, but big time athlete, big time arm. Why did he want Drew Lock back in that trade? Because he liked Drew Lock a lot. Well, what do you see when you see Drew Lock? Obviously, he's got some flaws as a player. Huge arm. So to me, Penix is like a better version of Tua. I like Penix. I'm recording this before the national championship game. I got money on Washington. I'm rooting for Washington. But I see him liking more of a Jaden Daniels. You know, J.J. McCarthy might have some more physical tools. Like, he likes the tools, I think, when it comes to quarterback. So I would be a little surprised if they went with Penix over some other guys, assuming they trade up. Mailbag. Do you have any know-how of this going on? And if this is true, what do you believe Jaden Daniels is on the Vikings front of the Vikings mind? This is a tweet. This is exactly what I heard from multiple people. I don't think people realize how hard the Vikings tried to trade up for Anthony Richardson last year. Like, the haul they put on the table was massive. They were going to give away the entire farm. All of it. They were going to give up everything. But it takes 2 to tango. I've never heard that. Wouldn't shock me. I think Anthony Richardson was a guy that a lot of teams like. And think how perfect of a situation that would have been for the Vikings. You trade a haul for Anthony Richardson, and you do the exact same thing that the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. Now, obviously, I'm not saying Anthony Richardson would have became Patrick Mahomes, but you redshirt him. You get to integrate him and onboard him, as the tech people say, into your operation. Practice every day, and just try to develop him as Kirk Cousins plays out his last year. And ironically, this season, once Kirk would have tore his Achilles, you would have been able to put him in the middle of the season. So it wouldn't shock me at all. The Vikings are definitely a team. We talk a lot about the Seahawks. To me, the Vikings are a prime team to circle of. Would not shock you on draft day when you and it's like their trade is in, and it's the Vikings have traded up to pick 6 or 8 or whatever. That's something that feels like it's going to happen a lot. There's been a talk all year about Tomlin and Belichick. What are your thoughts on Pete Carroll and the Seahawks quarterback situation? They're in the same spot with an older defensive head coach, and they seem to have every option at quarterback. Resign Geno, trade for a young quarterback. Well, Geno's under contract. So Geno, he's staying. So you don't have to resign him. I think, personally, listen, Pete has been incredible the last 20 years. He consistently wins. I think he's had, 1 losing season with Seattle? I guess 2, because when he first got there. But post Russell Wilson, 1 losing season. They missed the playoffs a couple times with 9 wins. He's 72 years old. And he's got an incredible amount of energy. Any young person aspires to be that energetic and be that passionate about what you're doing when you're his age. I would have 0 critical comments if they fired him. Or if they're like, can we go in a different direction? Like, let's just start over. Because you do have a young nucleus. You kind of have a lot going for you. If you're John, kind of let John Schneider pick a coach and go offense. Because think about this. There's no guarantee Arizona's ever going to be any good. But as long as Sean McVay doesn't want to be a full-time dad and stays coaching, and Kyle Shanahan's in San Francisco, you clearly have, in 2024, the 3rd best coach. And when it comes to a quarterback situation, the 3rd best quarterback situation, obviously the 4th. You'd rather have Kyler Murray than Geno Smith. So, yeah, I personally would fire him. And I'm not saying that like Arthur Smith or Ron Rivera, it's just time. I think this is about Belichick. I think this is about Tomlin. Sometimes professionally, a breakup, a fresh start is the healthiest thing that can happen. Now, would people hire Pete Carroll at 72 years old? I don't know. You could argue Bill's similar age. I think Bill's good at his job. I watch Pete Carroll. They're awful on defense. It's like, Pete, you're a defensive guy. You watch Belichick. They're fucking awesome on defense. So when all the dust settles, if Bill just has his offensive coordinator and Josh, his defense is going to be good. Why? He's the greatest defensive mastermind we've ever seen. And I just think Mike Tomlin is just, I would just rather have Mike Tomlin and Pete Carroll. Can't justify it with stats. They both win. If you gave me the choice, you get Mike Tomlin for the next 5 years with Pete Carroll, I'm taking Mike Tomlin. Lots of support from Manchester, England. I'm a Packer fan. I really liked what I've seen from Jordan Love. The latter half of this season, I think we should do all we can to add the supporting cast this offseason and in free agency. However, given the Packers can be a little conservative at times, I doubt they will. What do you think the Packers should do to help their young quarterback, aside from firing Joe Barry? Well, offensively, you guys are awesome. You have a boatload of offensive weapons, multiple young wide receivers. You got to find a way this offseason, to me, to figure out this hamstring issue with Watson. That's a big deal. Deebo Samuel used to get him early on in his career, and I don't know what they did training-wise, but they figured something out, and he doesn't get hamstring injuries anymore. You can't have him being hurt, because when he's on the field with everyone else, holy shit. We know you guys do a good job with offensive linemen. Defense, 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 defense. When you guys were great with Holmgren and Favre, you had an unreal defense. The year you won the Super Bowl, your defense played well. Most of the years you got bounced with the MVP versions of Aaron Rodgers, your defense let you down. So I would just defense, 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 defense. But they always invest in defense in the draft. I think, I would just focus on defense. I've heard you mention that you live in Arizona because of the great financial and tax benefits it provides. So my question to you is this. Do you think that the Chargers, Rams, Lakers struggle to hire good coaches or players because of the high cost of living? In your career, have you known people within the sports industry who got to work for one of the LA teams because of the high cost of living associated with the city? Also, if you could pick any city you wanted to coach or work in front office, which would it be? There was an article that came out that Buster Posey said San Francisco, it was very, very difficult for them to land free agents because it had a very toxic vibe. All those players that played there, they don't like it. LA to me is just in a different, it's its own little world when it comes to California because of the beach and you can live in Newport, right? Like Shohei Ohtani lives in Newport. Kobe Bryant lived in Newport. So to me, LA with the taxes, it really is nice. I've grew up hating it because I hated its teams. But once you get to a point where you're making as much money as Phil Jackson, LeBron James, Shohei Ohtani, Matt Stafford, I think people enjoy it because the areas you can live in are so nice. And unlike San Francisco, it's not like people don't live downtown LA, like these athletes or these coaches. They live in the sweet suburbs. Sometimes in San Francisco, like the Giants and the Warriors playing downtown San Francisco. And right now it's not great. It has a lot of issues. And there's no amount of money you could pay me to live there right now. Part of why I left is, one, I just needed a change. Two, the tax benefits and what I do. But it was like I wanted to live here. This is where I wanted to be. And for business reasons, for big picture reasons, just building my operation moving forward. So it was much more lucrative for me to come here. But I'm also it's not like I'm making a player $200 million, right? And I think sometimes in sports, it's easy for us to talk about it. In the NBA, you can be offered the most money. Same thing with coaching. I don't think it has any impact on the Southern California teams. I think it directly impacts the Niners run face. The Niners also don't play in San Francisco. All those guys live in Palo Alto, where Stanford is. It's 45 minutes away from the city. So their experience, I'm not a big San Jose guy, but their experience is dramatically different than the two teams in the city. So I would say on the LA thing, no, though I did know someone who works with a guy that used to work for the Rams in a major college program. And he told me that this guy, I think he was making, I'm not making up the number, but I forget the exact number. Let's just say $350 for the Rams. And when he moved to this college program in the South, is making less. Let's say $250. Yet he has more money in his bank every day, and the cost of living, bigger home, and everything for way cheaper. So yeah, it factors in for some people. like Sean McVay. I mean, he's making $18 million. Is he losing more in taxes making $18 million there than he would if he was making $18 million for Vegas? Yeah. Sean McVay lives in a fucking, probably a mansion somewhere in the hills. So I think LA is kind of uniquely equipped that way. The older you get, the more money you have. LA is just dramatically better than Northern California. And I'm born and raised Northern California, but it's not even close. It just is. Big fan of the show. Most recent mailbag, you brought up Ryan Day, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. As an Ohio State guy and living in Columbus, I'm surrounded by people that believe he is the best coach Ohio State can get. And moving on from him would mean a downgrade. I disagree with that. As Ohio State has to be a top 10 job nationally. Top 10 job? You guys are like a top 3 job. You could argue if you're not a Southern guy, it's the best job. So, yeah, I'm with you. Both NFL and college. Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying. If you were the AD, who would you hire? Well, I don't think Vrabel would want it because I have a hard time seeing Vrabel, NIL and stuff, but I would hire Vrabel in a heartbeat over Ryan Day. I mean, listen, to me, Ryan Day is clearly on the hot seat going into this season. And if he loses to Michigan again, he's done. I just think it's over. You can't lose to Michigan 4 times in a row. You just simply can't. Ryan Day is praying, and I don't blame him, that Jim Harbaugh leaves. And then whether they keep Sharon Moore, whether they hire DeBoer, and then hopefully he can beat that guy. Obviously, he couldn't beat Sharon Moore this year. But, yeah. As a Bears fan, that is sadly accepting the fact that Eberflus is likely to return. Who are some of the potential offensive coordinators that would be a fit in Chicago? I think the guy mentioned it earlier. Kellen Moore proved that he had a success with Dak. Bieniemy was pretty bad this year when he got to run a show. Was really bad. It's not. I got no issue with the guy. I always heard from people in Kansas City that thought he was a good coach. He got his opportunity to run his offense, and it was pretty ugly. Frank Reich, guys like that, no. I would do what everyone's been doing. I would go to the McVay, Shanahan tree, Kevin O'Connell, and try to find a guy like that and run that offense. Why? That offense works, and it's very quarterback friendly. Now, you could say, your guy, Gutsy, or Getsy, Gutsy is the GM of the Packers, ran that. I don't really think they did because of Justin Fields. But if I drafted Caleb Williams, that's what I would do. I would run some, mix and match what Sean McVay does, a little more pass happy with the run elements of Kyle Shanahan. Go to those 2 staffs, hire one of their offensive guys, make him your offensive coordinator. Brian Greasy, who's now been the quarterback coach with Purdy and Kyle for the last 2 years, make him the offensive coordinator. How much noise do you think Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA will make in the Big Ten next year for years to come? Could any of them overtake Michigan or Ohio State as the face of the conference? I think it'd be pretty difficult. One, Ohio State just is so relentless with their money that they will, in this day and age, will refuse to suck. So to me, Ohio State, we're going to see if Michigan is just going to sustain this dominance if Jim leaves. Because I saw them without Jim Harbaugh. They were fucking bad. They were really bad. So I don't think they're a lock. Ohio State is always good. Ohio State's been good my entire life. And they just spend so much money. I do think now that Michigan has got the taste of what Harbaugh has brought them, they will open up the checkbook no matter what to keep winning. So I would say for the foreseeable future, those would be the programs. Oregon is willing to spend what it takes because of Phil Knight, because of the money they have, what they invest in recruiting. To me, Washington might be a little flash in the pan in terms of being a 13-14 win team because of the perfect storm with Penix, but Kalen DeBoer is good. So to me, Oregon and Washington are going to come in and clearly going to be, are going to be 8-9 win teams. Washington for sure. Oregon might have a higher ceiling than that if they get good quarterback play because of the talent they're going to have on their roster. Washington, I could see taking a little bit of a step back next year, but the conference sucks. James Franklin has no offense, right? Nebraska is going to be all in on an 18-year-old quarterback. Wisconsin fell off a cliff. Minnesota, think about some of the teams we're talking. Michigan State's in shambles, though Jonathan Smith's a good coach. UCLA is zero threat. Chip Kelly barely winning 6-7 games in the Pac-12 over the last several years. Obviously, this year, had the Pac-12 was good. And USC, they got a lot of questions to answer. I know Lincoln can scheme offense, but that program was a little disarray. They went 7-5 this year with Caleb Williams. 7-5. I like Lincoln, and I'm rooting for him because I like the USC brand and what they mean to college football, but he inherited a monster at Oklahoma. He inherited a dumpster fire at USC, and by year 2, they were trending in the wrong direction. So I would have more faith in Oregon and Washington, assuming DeBoer stays and doesn't go to Michigan, if Harbaugh leaves, then USC is a major question mark to me, and UCLA to me is just going to be a random Big Ten team. They're going to be like Minnesota. First off, putting out the best football content. I like this guy. So I'm a New Yorker living in Chicago. Downtime for New York fans has made me empathize with Bears fans. That's a tough life. Got me thinking I figured out how to fix the Bears this offseason. Maybe I just played too much Madden franchise mode as a kid. Here's the plan. Trade off the first pick, get the haul, maneuver and be able to draft Penix and Odunze. Fill in the gaps with O-line and find another impact defensive player in the draft as well. Your offense will have cohesion, 2 stud wide receivers, a real grown-up at quarterback, and draft capital for the future. Am I crazy, or does this work? Also, you think this is the argument for the Giants to stay with Daboll? Yeah, I think you got to balance. The hard part is what happened in college doesn't happen in the pros. It's why we see time and time again guys be unreal players in Power 5 conferences, the Big Ten, the SEC, and struggle in the pros. There is no guarantee. I love Penix and Odunze. There's no guarantee either one is going to be some dominant NFL player. You would say Odunze, you feel more confident as, because usually really good wide receivers that have translatable skills are good NFL players, assuming they get a decent quarterback. Quarterbacks is such a, flip of a coin. The problem with your idea is a lot of these trades now happen well before the draft, right? Teams like to pull the trigger end of March, early April. Well, if you trade it back from, even if you trade Fields, right, using your example, and go from like 1 to 4 or 5, what if Penix goes? And then all of a sudden Penix isn't there. So if you want one of the other quarterbacks, I don't think you would do that till draft day. If they trade before, maybe they would roll with Fields, but I would doubt they do. Look at Detroit's spoiled extra point try. Even if Decker was ruled to reported eligible, he isn't covered up on that side of the line. The slot guy is lined up in the backfield, so they could have even called an illegal formation. Totally agree. Hate rehashing that conversation, but that got a little exhausting. Okay, last question. I'm a Charger fan, but you're an intelligent man. I want your take on this. What steps do you think are the most important for a franchise to take in a situation like the Chargers are in? What positions are the most important to get right, keep, or do everything else, or do something else with? I believe in Herbert as an all-time dude, and we cannot waste his potential. Well, first and foremost, this for all this. Like, until we talk about the draft order, well, is Eberflus back for sure? Who's Washington's coach? What does the Patriots do? Right? What are the Titans doing? So before, like, we talk about the draft order, well, who's coaching the team? If you tell me Jim Harbaugh is the coach of the Washington Commanders, maybe they take J.J. McCarthy number 2. Maybe Michael Penix, I'm recording this before it throws 3 or 4 touchdowns on him, he takes him. So Jim Harbaugh had the Chicago Bears job. I don't think he'd be 100% locked to take Caleb Williams. So who's your coach? Who is your coach? Once you get the coach, then I go, okay, I know what type of players they'll want. The number one thing Harbaugh would do immediately would be to build a line of scrimmage, offensive, defensive lines, and get a better running back, right? He'd want a power running game. He had success in San Francisco. He had Frank Gore. His success these last several years, Blake Corum has been a stud. It's kind of his version of Frank Gore. He's going to want a running back who can do it all, because it's why Kyle Shanahan's favorite player is Christian McCaffrey. Why? Because the whole offense is built around him. Because he can do it all. Catch the ball, run the ball between the tackles, outside the tackles, inside zone, outside zone, pitches, sweeps, fucking do it all. It's what Harbaugh likes. So, and that makes it easier on the quarterback. You could argue draft the tight end. Harbaugh loves tight ends. Blake Bowers, take him early in the draft. Put him with Herbert. He's his Travis Kelce. He's his George Kittle. He's his Rob Gronkowski. Quarterback's best friend. Good blockers and a tight end. Why? Because most tight ends are within 15, 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. Max. Easier to get the ball to. Keenan Allen, I saw, said today he wants to return. Well, I like Keenan Allen, banged up a lot. Will we take a pay cut? They're spending a lot of money on Mike Williams for his ACL. I would imagine Khalil Mack's not on the team. They're going to need Joey Bosa to play. You need to get 17 games out of you. Defense needs a lot of work, personnel-wise, scheme-wise. Good thing with Harbaugh, when he comes, they'll have a real defensive coordinator. He'll be good. But when it comes to personnel, to me, the Chargers got to figure out the weapons, and they got to figure out the defense. And to me, they need a good tight end to go with Herbert and a real running back. Eckler's a solid player. To me, he's like a gadget guy. A really good gadget guy. I think sometimes it has a negative connotation. I need a guy that I can just ride like a horse. That's how Harbaugh plays. It just helps kind of when things are a little off kilter in a given game, kind of mellow everything out, settles the game down. So obviously, you get that guy in the third or fourth round, but I think they need a big physical back as a presence in that offensive lineup.